everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day today. So today I'll be talking about profiles and the role settings. If you haven't watched my previous videos, I would highly encourage you to check it out. So profile, as you know, in Salesforce plays a very important role. So profile controls what user can see, what user can't see, and the tabs and every other settings the user have access to. And if you remember, you also know that the profile controls the login hours and the login IP. So if, for instance, that if you're an organization, right, and if you have a policies that no user should be able to log in beyond 6 p.m. every day, say Sunday to Sunday, 7 days a week, you can control that using profile settings. Okay, right, cool. So let's jump into profile. So as you can see, I've already typed in profile here. So you go to profiles and you can see a bunch of standard profiles and custom profiles, right? So now you have to keep one thing into consideration, right? So it's better not to assign a standard profile to a new user, right? Unless the user is a sysadmin. Because there are a lot of limitations in the standard profile. There are a lot of things you can't change. So it's a good practice to create a custom profile and assign to a user. And another thing you have to remember here is that you can't delete a standard profile. As you can see, there are no delete options next to the standard profile, right? So the way to create a new profile, you can do either by cloning an existing profile or you can go to new. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clone a standard user profile. So if you, let's see. All right, just a second. Okay, you know what? Let's clone sysadmin profile, right? Okay, so let's clone that one. And I will put it as custom sysadmin. Right, so you get to see this option here. Now, the one thing you have to remember is that it's great that we created a profile, but we have to assign a user to it, right? So the way you can do is you can go to assign users, and you can add a new user here, or you can add an existing user here. So what I'm going to do is that I will assign an existing user to this profile. So the way I can go to users, and if you remember that I've created this test user, so I will go to edit and I will change the platform. So if you see the sysadmin, you can't assign a custom profile because under Salesforce platform here, because there's no sysadmin here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change it to Salesforce. And there you are. You can see my custom sysadmin, and I will save it. So as I mentioned, that it's always better. It's advisable to use custom profile for any user you create, unless that user is a sysadmin. For instance, that Mark is a sysadmin, so we have a sysadmin profile for it. So that's great. And okay, so now I have assigned my profile to this user. Let's fiddle with some options, right? So let's go back to profile again. I wanted to make this lecture short so that you understand what I'm trying to cover, because I don't want it to cover a lot of information to overwhelm you guys, because the security is very critical, and I wanted to show you what you can achieve using different profile settings. Okay? All right, so let's go to system admin profile here, and let's go to assign apps, right? So now this assigned apps, what I mean by assigned apps is that, for instance, I logged it as a system admin, right? So when you go here, right? So these are all the apps that's been assigned to you. So for instance, I have something called community, right? I can see community here. So let me go here, view, and if I right click and open link in a new tab, I can see this community app. So apps, as you know, in Salesforce, are a group of tabs in the screens, right? And tabs are different objects in Salesforce, right? So that's pretty much it. Okay, so sorry, I don't want to digress here. So this app settings, right? This thing controls what you can see from here. So let's say I wanted to turn off a community option for this custom profile. So before we do that, I just wanted to demonstrate one thing. So let's get into that user settings. So I'll be testing this user, right? Test. And this user, as you remember, I've assigned this custom profile, right? Now the way I can test this user is by going to this login option. So I'll be logging in as a test user. So if you remember in my previous videos, I've talked about enabling this option by going to login, access policies, and this is a checkbox. So if you tick this, if you enable this, you can see that login button next to your user, and you can log in to that user. It's very handy for a sysadmin, right? Because sometimes what happens, the user comes to you and say, look, I can't use certain options. The one which I'm going to demonstrate now. So yeah, so let's go to user, and let's log in here, right? And this is a kind of troubleshooting. I'm going to teach you how to do that as well. So let's go to sales. So as you can see that this user, right, the test user, has access to this community app, right? So let me make this as a sales, so I can have access to the sales as well, right? Okay, that's all good, because I just wanted to show you what you can see as a test. That's great. So let's log off. Now let's jump back into the profile setting again. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off the community option for this specific user, for this profile. So go to this profile, go to assign apps, and go to edit, and let's turn this community guy off here. Right, now let's go to users, right? And let's see now whether you can have an access to community or not. Let's go here and look for community. There you go, you can't see it. Now, let's say sysadmin turned this option off for you, right? For whatever reason. And you logged into your profile and you say, look, hey, what's going on? I can't see community option here. So obviously you're gonna contact your sysadmin or Salesforce admin, whatever you call the terminology. So you email that person and say, look, I can't access community for whatever reason. So now the best way this Salesforce admin troubleshoot is going to your profile. So the way he can go to your profile is by using this option. That's why this login button is very important sometimes for sysadmin to troubleshoot, because obviously that person can ask you for your password, right? Because you won't feel comfortable giving the person your password. So, right, okay. So now I've demonstrated you the app settings. So now, so you call your sysadmin and say, look, I can't access the community, I want access back. So the way he does it, so he goes back to your profile, he look at your profile and see, let's see what's going on. So he log in as your, so he goes to your profile settings and goes to sign apps, and he said, oh wow, you have no access to it. So that's why. So you go here and you turn it back on. So there you go, you will get access back. Okay, so this is how you can limit certain app settings using the signed apps. So it's very powerful features. So and another thing I want to talk about is in object settings, right? So objects are accounts, contacts. So these are different objects here, right? So let me go into account first. Let's talk about accounts. So now you see there are some option here called default on, right? So what I mean by default on, so let me log into this user again, right? I'll show you what I mean by default on. So when you go to the sales profile, right, you can see this account tab by default, under this app, sales app, right? That's what it called default on here. So let me make it default off for this user. Let's see. Let me log it off. Okay. I'm gonna go to edit, and it's gonna go to default off. Right now, you'll see the difference. What I mean by that. It's very important concept. So now let's go to the login again. There you go, your account is gone. But you can still access it by going to your app settings here. So this tic-tac-toe icon, and you can say, oh, okay, I want to see accounts. So there you go. You see, you can see an accounts here. So it means that it's default, it's taken off from this tab, but you can still access it, right? So that's very cool feature if you do not want someone a default access for whatever reason. Right, okay. Now let's go back and make it to tab hidden. So if I do not want this specific profile to have access to account for whatever reason, so I can go and make it tab hidden here. Right? This is a very important concept, and so it's very important you understand the difference between tab on, default on, default off, and tab hidden. So now let's go and log into the user again and see what happens. So you can't see an account here, right? Because we made it tab hidden. Now I go to accounts. You can't see accounts here because it's completely hidden. So that's one of the important concepts you have to keep into consideration. Difference between tab hidden, default on, and default off. Very powerful feature. So, and another thing you can do here is to turn off the CRUD access. Say for instance, currently my profile, this custom profile, have access to edit. That means I can edit an account information, I can read an account information, I can create, I can delete it, right? Let's say if I want this user to only read and edit, right? So what I can do, I can turn off the create option, I can turn off the delete option. There you go. So you as a user will not have an access to delete it. Let me demonstrate it for you guys, right? So before I do that, let me enable set it back to the default on. This is very powerful feature. Profile is very, very important. If you understand this profile very well, you will master the Salesforce security, because this is where you control the stuff, and this is very, very powerful. Okay, all right. So let's get into the login again. All right. So whatever reason I'll go to Lightning Experience. I can see account here, right? Now I have what all the options I have. I can read, I can edit, right? So let me go to, let's pick up an account, all accounts, whatever. Let's fiddle with one, Auckland Pub, for instance, right? I wanted to change something here, because I presume I would be able to do that because I have read access. Make it hard, whatever. Yeah, I can do that, right? Fantastic, because I can edit, and I can read. Great. Now let me go back to my list and let me see if I can delete it. I don't have a delete option here. Isn't it interesting? Fantastic. And let me see if I can create it. I can't create it as well because I don't have a create option here. Let's change the profile setting again. Okay, and let's turn this off. Sorry guys, I don't want it to overwhelm you. I just wanted to show you what all things you can do. Usually account is not a good example, but you get the point what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So let me go back to edit, and I will enable, I will delete it. Hopefully we can do some delete options here. Right, and we go to login again. I wanted to cover roles as well, but I won't be going too much of details into roles. But so you see now you can do a new here, right? And I can create a new, and let's go to all accounts, and now I can pretty much delete it here, right? Because I have enabled the delete option using my profile, right? You get the point what I'm trying to say. The profile basically controls what you can do with the Salesforce object, right? Okay, cool. That's pretty much I wanted to cover about profile. And one more thing. There's always a lot of things you can talk about profiles, right? So if you remember that, we talked about login IP ranges and login hours. This basically controls your user access to your org, so you can control it using here. Session settings, password policies, you can maintain it, right? So these are these two things, right? Signups and object settings are very, very important. Then if you're dealing with your Apex classes and Visualforce, you can deal with it. I don't want to get into detail. So when we talk about developer aspects of Salesforce, we will talk more about this one. For now, it's a basic exercise. We want to stick to the basics, right? Don't want it to overwhelm you guys. So, okay, cool. All right, let's talk about roles now. So if you remember, under users, let's go to test again. You have an option to either select a role or or not assign any role. Roles are similar to organization chart. What you have CEO, you have vice president, underneath you have sales executive, then blah blah. But you have to understand there is a bit difference to it. Difference is about the information you can see. So I will tell you what I mean by that. So let's go to roles. So when you go to roles, this is the first pretty nice looking organization chart you can see here. Just to give you a visual representation of what I mean by that. So this, for if you have an organization chart in your company, right, you will think, oh, this is pretty much looks similar. It looks similar from a visual perspective, but there are some differences here, right? So let's talk about the differences. So for instance, this is a CEO, and CEO under CEO you have sales director, Western, Eastern, International, right? So now CEO can see every information related to these guys underneath him. But when it comes to Western sales director cannot see information what CEO can see, because cannot see information about the CEO, and cannot see any information around Eastern or international sales director. Can only see information about the people who reports to him or her. So that's how it is. That's how the security model works here. So you can see everything underneath you, but you cannot see anything above you. So so the way this is actually a pretty neat a picture, in my opinion, to give you a clear indication about what the roles looks like. Many people confuses thinking, oh, it's exactly like an organization org structure. It is similar to it, but there's a lot of difference to it in terms of data access, as I mentioned. So yeah, so if you don't want to see this option, you can turn it off, but I don't prefer to turn it off because it gives me a clear visual representation, and I like the picture. Yeah. So you can go to products. It's pretty much the same. And company size, yeah, it doesn't give much information, but it's you know, you get my point what I'm trying to say. So okay, let's set up roles. So you can see you have CEO, and under CEO you have CFO. All these kind of roles are setups, and you can assign the user here. Let's say if you go here, I've assigned Mark. You can assign different user. You can drag and drop here. This is one place you can assign, or other places by going to the users and setting up a role. And if you wanted to create a new role, you can add a role here, which will come exactly under here, Wilson, the top of the list. And if you wanted to add a role under CO, you can assign it here, and then you can assign the user, right? And if you're not comfortable with the tree view structure, right, you can pretty much change it to, you know, sort of list view. This will give you information. Or if you wanted to see nested one, right, you can see this as well. I pretty much like this view as well as the tree view. So yeah, so the roles, when we talk about roles, right, it's more about the data access. So the way you can access a record. So any information about the resource underneath you can access it. Their records, you can access it. But any information about your boss, right, you can't access it. But your boss can access your data. So this is how the role. This is pretty much the data security layer works. So there are a lot of things that we have about the manual sharing, permission sets. So I will be talking about that in my next lecture. I don't want it to overwhelm you guys, because I wanted to keep it very simple so that you guys can get a glimpse of what it means by Salesforce profiles and the things you can control using profile. Profiles is very important. As I can't emphasize enough that how important a profile is, because if you don't understand profile very well, you will expose your Salesforce org for potential hack, because you will expose the data to a person who is not supposed to be doing this stuff. For instance, you might expose a developer delete access to an account where he or she shouldn't be having that in the first place. So understanding a profile and permission sets is very important. I will cover the permission sets in next lecture, right? So that's all I wanted to cover, you guys. I hope you guys stay safe. Have a great day or evening, wherever you are. And thank you very much for attending this. I really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.